Southern Germany. April 1945. The war was collapsing. Villages burned beneath black smoke. Roads were flooded with refugees, soldiers, and children too young to understand why the world was ending. Hidden behind a burned-out truck, a 15-year-old boy was waiting to die. His name was Emil Foert, and in his trembling hands was a Panzerfaust almost heavier than his own body. Emil hadn't eaten properly in 3 days. Every breath hurt. Inside his coat pocket, he still carried a photograph of his mother. The edges were burned black from an air raid weeks earlier. The Volkssturm armband, wrapped around his sleeve, no longer felt like honor, only fear. Then, he heard it. A low metallic growl rolling across the ruined road. Tank tracks. Closer. Closer. Emil didn't run, because in his mind, there was nowhere left to run to. He had been told his entire life, Americans are monsters. They torture prisoners. They kill boys who surrender. They hate Germans. And death was better than capture. He believed every word, because fear had shaped his childhood long before war ever did. 2 days earlier, his friend Friedrich had tried to stop an American tank. He was 16, terrified. The Panzerfaust kicked violently from his hands, and before he could even stand, machine guns tore through the street. After that, there was only silence. Now, it was Emil's turn. The tank emerged through the smoke. Massive, unstoppable, less than 30 meters away. Emil tightened his grip on the weapon. His hands shook so badly, he could barely breathe. He closed his eyes, waiting for gunfire, waiting for death. But instead, a voice cut through the smoke. Calm, human. "Kid, put it down." Emil opened his eyes. Kid. Not enemy, not Nazi. Just kid. The voice came again. "We're not going to shoot you." Nothing about this felt possible. Everything he had ever been taught said Americans should hate him. And for the first time in his life, a terrible thought entered his mind. What if everything was a lie? Slowly, Emil lowered the Panzerfaust. The movement felt impossible, like his entire world was resisting it. Then he stepped out from behind the truck, hands raised, certain this was the moment he would die. It never came. 3 American soldiers approached carefully. One of them was black. Emil froze instantly. Nazi propaganda had taught him to fear men like this since childhood. Every instinct screamed, monster, danger, enemy. The soldier stared at him for a moment, then quietly lowered his rifle. Jesus, he's just a kid. The soldier stepped closer. Emil flinched, but instead of violence, the man held out a canteen. Drink. Emil stared at it in confusion. His brain refused to understand what he was seeing. The enemy was offering him water. His hands shook violently as he took it. And for the first time in days, he cried. Something inside him began to break, not suddenly, slowly, like a wall collapsing stone by stone. There was no torture, no hatred, only exhausted men who had seen too many dead civilians and too many children carrying weapons. The war Emil believed in suddenly felt very small. Days later, Emil arrived at an American prisoner camp near Mannheim. There were no executions, no beatings, only blankets, soup, medicine. An American medic examined his arm, then quietly gave him extra food. Like he wasn't an enemy soldier, just a starving boy. Inside the camp, Emil saw photographs for the first time. Concentration camps, bodies stacked together, children reduced to bones, entire families erased by hunger. Dachau, Buchenwald, Bergen-Belsen, and suddenly, the world he grew up believing in collapsed completely. Because the war had not only been fought with bullets, but with lies. Germany had not simply lost the war. It had taught millions to fear truth itself, and Emil understood something far worse than defeat. He had almost died, for people who never cared whether he lived at all. Months later, Emil returned home. What remained of his village barely looked familiar. His mother cried the moment she saw him alive. She expected to see a broken soldier. Instead, she saw her son, thin, traumatized, but alive. And inside his pocket was a small piece of American chocolate he had saved for her. Years later, Emil Foert became a history teacher, not to glorify war, but to warn people how easily fear can replace truth. When students asked him what changed his life forever, he never talked about tanks, or surrender, or battles. He always said the same thing. It was water, because sometimes the most powerful moment in war is not when someone pulls a trigger, but when an enemy chooses to stay human.